For 40 years, Holden and Ford built faster cars, hired better engineers, and spent more money than any two companies in Australian history, all trying to destroy each other. They both succeeded, and when the smoke finally cleared, there was nothing left standing. Not Holden, not Ford, not the industry itself. To understand how this rivalry destroyed both companies, you need to understand what it actually was, because most people think it started at Bathurst. It didn't. It started in a boardroom in 1948, when General Motors launched Holden as Australia's own car, not imported, not assembled from foreign parts, built here, designed here, for Australian roads and Australian conditions. What Australians simply called the Holden sold 20,000 units in its first year. The country had never seen anything like it. Ford was here too, of course. Ford had been selling cars in Australia since 1925, but Ford was building American cars on Australian soil. Holden was building something different, something local. For almost 2 decades, that distinction didn't matter much. Both companies sold cars. Australians bought them. Life continued. But here's where everything changes. In 1960, Ford Australia made a decision that would define the next 50 years of this industry. They built a car from scratch. Not a rebadged American model, not a local body on an imported chassis compromise, a clean sheet Australian car. They called it the Falcon. The XK Falcon launched in September 1960 and immediately outsold the Holden. For the first time since 1948, Holden did not lead the Australian market. Holden responded, Ford countered. Each year, each new model, the engineering got sharper and the rivalry got harder. But it was still just a sales war. Numbers on a ledger. Then both companies discovered Bathurst. The Bathurst 500, what we now call the Bathurst 1000, was not initially a manufacturer's battle. It was a privateer race. Amateur drivers in road cars navigating one of the most dangerous circuits on Earth. But by the mid-1960s, both Ford and Holden realised what Bathurst actually was. It wasn't a race, it was a laboratory. And the results were broadcast into every living room in Australia. In 1967, Ford won Bathurst with the XR Falcon GT. It was the beginning of something that neither company fully understood at the time. Holden's response was swift, specific, and expensive. They took the Tirana, a small, unassuming family car, stripped it to its bones, and rebuilt it as a weapon. The GTR XU1, and they sent it to Bathurst. The war had officially begun. Before we go further, smash the like button, subscribe to Aussie Car Expert. Let's break it down. Now, here's something that rarely gets the recognition it deserves. In 1971, Ford Australia built the fastest 4-door production car on the planet. Not the fastest car in Australia, the fastest 4-door production car on Earth. Full stop. It was called the Falcon GTHO Phase 3. And to this day, it stands as one of the most extraordinary things any Australian manufacturer has ever produced. The Phase 3 was built for one purpose, to win Bathurst. But to race at Bathurst, you needed a homologation car, a road-legal version of whatever you put on track. Ford needed to build 300 of them, so they did. Under the bonnet sat a 351 cubic inch Cleveland 5.8. Ford listed the official power output at 300 horsepower. The actual output was closer to 380. Ford understated the figures deliberately, and we'll come to exactly why in a moment. Top speed, 142 miles per hour, 0 to 60. 6.4 seconds in 1971, in a 4-door family sedan built in Broadmeadows, Victoria. At the 1971 Bathurst 500, Ford entered the Phase 3 and did something that had never been done before. They finished first, second, and third. A 1, 2, 3 sweep. Alan Moffat led the charge. The Holden camp had no answer for it, and here is what makes this so remarkable. Ford didn't celebrate. They were already working on the Phase 4. The Phase 4 was everything the Phase 3 was and more. A new body, more power, more downforce. 4 prototype examples were completed before Ford made the decision to release it to the public. They never did, because while Ford was building the fastest car in the world, Australia was having a national panic attack about fast cars. In 1972, a Sydney newspaper ran a front-page story about the dangers of supercars, high-performance homologation vehicles that, in the paper's view, were irresponsibly encouraging speed and reckless driving on public roads. Politicians seized on it. State governments threatened legislation. Insurance companies threatened to refuse coverage on any vehicle capable of certain speeds. Ford calculated the risk. They shelved the Phase 4. 3 of the 4 completed cars were converted to race cars. 1 prototype road car survived. The fastest 4-door production car on Earth died quietly in a boardroom, killed not by competition, but by newspaper headlines and political theatre. 300 Phase 3s were built. Today, fewer than 100 are believed to still exist. In recent years, surviving examples have sold at auction for between $450,000 and $1.15 million. The market has delivered its verdict on what Ford killed. If you're getting something out of this, the history, the detail, the story of what Australian cars actually were, hit subscribe. We do this every week on Aussie Car Expert. Back to it. With the Phase 4 dead, Ford's factory racing program began to lose its edge. Not immediately. Alan Moffat kept winning at Bathurst through 1973 and 1974. But something had changed. Ford was fighting with yesterday's weapons. Holden wasn't standing still. Through the mid-1970s, Holden's engineers did to the Tirana what Ford had done to the Falcon. They turned a road car into a race car and sold enough of them to go racing. The result was the A9X, a lighter, more powerful, more aerodynamic version of an already capable machine. In 1979, Peter Brock drove an A9X to a win so complete at Bathurst that the opposition, in the true sense of the word, quit. Not just lost. Withdrew from the race. Holden had won so decisively that continuing felt pointless. By the early 1980s, Holden had won the engineering war. They had better cars, better drivers, a clearer factory commitment to racing. Ford's response got slower. Their investment got smaller. The gap widened. And here's what nobody was watching while all of this was happening. The thing that made both companies great, the competition between them, was beginning to disappear. When Ford stopped pushing, Holden stopped needing to answer. When Holden stopped needing to answer, the engineering slowed. The racing programs became more about marketing than development. The cars got softer. The gap between what Australians were building and what the global market was building started to widen. The rivalry had not just been a war, it had been an engine. A brutal, expensive, spectacular engine that drove both companies forward, and when one side pulled back, the engine started to stall. By the 2000s, both Ford and Holden were making decisions that had nothing to do with winning at Bathurst. They were making decisions about survival. The Australian dollar had strengthened. The cost of manufacturing locally had risen. Government subsidies, the ones that had propped up both industries since the post-war era, were under constant political pressure, and the imported alternatives were getting better, faster and cheaper with every model cycle. In May 2013, Ford Australia made an announcement. They would cease manufacturing in Australia in 2016. After 88 years of building cars on Australian soil, they were done. The announcement landed like a blow. But within months, something even more significant happened. Holden followed. In December 2013, General Motors announced that Holden would end Australian manufacturing by 2017. Toyota announced the same. Within 6 months, the entire Australian automotive manufacturing industry, every last factory, every last production line, was scheduled for closure. Ford's last Australian-built car rolled off the line in October 2016. Holden's last car, a ZB Commodore, rolled off the line in Elizabeth, South Australia on the 20th of October 2017. October 20th, the same month, the same plant that built the Tirana that Peter Brock drove to victory in 1979. And here is what makes this so remarkable. Holden won the war. They outlasted Ford's factory racing program. They built better cars through the 1980s. They dominated the market with the Commodore for 2 decades. By every measure of the rivalry itself, Holden won, and they still closed. The victory was real. The trophy was real, and it meant nothing. So, what actually happened here? And more importantly, what does it mean? Here is the argument that nobody makes, but the evidence supports. The rivalry between Holden and Ford did not weaken Australian car manufacturing. It was the only thing keeping it alive. Every year that Ford invested in a faster Falcon, Holden had to invest in a faster Tirana, a faster Commodore, a sharper engine, a better suspension package. The competition forced both companies to develop real engineering capability on Australian soil. Real capability that could not be easily replicated by imported alternatives. When Ford withdrew from the factory racing program in the early 1980s, Holden lost its reason to keep pushing. Not immediately, but gradually. Inevitably, the investment in local engineering started to drift toward the cheaper option, which was always to import a global platform and badge it locally. The A9X had been too good for its own good. It destroyed Ford, And then in destroying Ford, it destroyed the very competition that gave it meaning. 50 years of warfare, billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of jobs, dozens of Bathurst victories, an entire national identity built around two sets of badge colours, and in the end, both armies packed up and went home. Not because they lost, because there was nothing left worth fighting for. The last Holden rolled off the line in 2017. The last Ford had already gone. Australia had its winner. It just didn't have its industry. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe. Every week on Aussie Car Expert, we dig into the real stories behind Australian cars, the engineering, the decisions, and the consequences that nobody bothered to explain at the time. Drop a comment below. Who do you think actually won, Holden or Ford? And if you had to choose one car from this entire era to drive today, what would it be? I want to hear it.